What's up, everybody? Thralls of Metal here. I'm Jammin John.
Necrotic Nick.
And we are bringing you yet another album review. Now, this album is by a band that I hadn't really heard of until we found it on our list to do reviews. And I just want to say on a side note, if you've noticed lately, I'm hosting at least one review here a week. We decided that I was going to do that. So every week when the list comes out, I pick a band, and I had kind of forgotten what band to choose, and so we get down to this one, and I'm like, shit. And the reason behind that is we are going over the newest record from Oranssi Pazuzu with Muuntautuja. Now, all of these song titles are in Finnish, and fuck me for not being well-versed in any language outside of English, really. So this is going to be a trip to say. It only makes sense that I, of course, have to go over this band. But anyway, yeah, we're going to go over this record. This comes out on the 11th of October on Nuclear Blast Records. This band formed in 2007 in Finland. This is their 6th full-length album. They also have a split and 2 EPs. For those of you that don't know, this is listed as psychedelic black metal.
I mean, all right. First off, when I see the word psychedelic, generally I think of pleasantries, like, oh, bright colors, and look at all the shiny everything. This album is proof that psychedelic doesn't always mean you're having a good trip. This was my first real exposure to this band as well. I heard a lot of rumblings about them, like, different reviewers talking about them, like, hey, if you want a really dark, intense listen, check out this band. Part of me would kind of like, throw them in that kind of like avant-garde style of metal. Like, even black metal doesn't necessarily feel appropriate. Like, this is really kind of its own thing in terms of a blend of just all sorts of dark, ugly, menacing things. Anyway, I'm pretty sure this review is going to get strange, and I know all these words are going to be hard to say, and I was kind of hoping I could look at the lyrics and see if I get some insight in terms of what they're talking about. Guess what? They're all in Finnish too, which totally makes sense. But yeah, take it away, Jammin John. Let's pronounce some of this stuff.
Yeah, you know what the fun thing is I looked up a lot of these words or these titles in Google Translate to see if I could get a pronunciation, and guess what? Google had no idea about any of these words, so this is going to be a kind of a play-by-play of me trying out words. And even during the time we listened to this, I went over each of these words in my head and said, all right, you're going to nail it.
What?
The only thing I'm going to nail here is failure.
Right, and failure's behind, too, I'm sure. Yeah, like, all these words are very difficult, but you know what? Honestly, the fact that these song titles are not in English, nothing's in English here, honestly, it kind of adds to the weird, mysterious atmosphere of this band. Because even, going into this, I really wasn't sure what I was about to listen to. Like, I'd heard a lot of people describe it as, avant-garde, black metal. But even that doesn't describe it. And that's right from the rip with the opening track, Bioalchemistry. Maybe I said that right. I don't know. Probably not. That might be one of the easier ones. But right away, the atmosphere feels more like industrial metal, power electronics.
Yeah.
I got a lot of Godflesh vibes on here, and I'm reasonably sure these guys are probably fans of Godflesh with the amount of looping and samples. Because rhythmically, this kind of does what Godflesh is really known for, like a drum pattern that is kind of continuous throughout the song, like maybe a few breaks here and there, but the groove kind of holds sway. And in terms of anything black metal, it's kind of atypical in the sense that you don't get blast beats or D beats.
No, or tremolos or none of that.
Or really, honestly, riffs. There's some moments on here that I would say are kind of riffy, but most of this is about atmosphere and oddly hypnotic grooves.
Yeah. Actually, hypnotic grooves are a fairly big part of this. And here I go, I gotta pronounce these songs. The title track, my favorite track of this whole album, Hot to Tuli, I think that's how you pronounce it.
I've had that once. It's a really pleasant pasta dish.
Right. And even Iki Karme, I don't know. I don't know what that word is. I don't. But anyway, those have such wonderfully hypnotic, just trippy grooves to them. It reminds me a lot of DJ Shadow and Portishead and the Dust Brothers and just stuff with looped, trippy drums. And it's such a cool thing. In fact, the bass line in Hatatuli reminds me of Cypress Hill's Make a Move.
For me, the thing that I heard, and it's weird because this band kind of just reunited, Soul Coughing. A band that is just known for kind of drone bass grooves, like a stand-up bass. And then they don't have like really a traditional guitarist or anything like that. It's essentially a guy that generates like weird, like oscillating noises and such and stuff that sounds like metal scraping on metal. It's kind of the same vibe except without like the lightheartedness. There's nothing lighthearted about this. Like that comparison to Soul Coughing only works if Soul Coughing is scoring a horror movie or a snuff film.
Yeah, there's nothing light here at all. The word light doesn't exist whatsoever. It is dark as hell all the time.
Yeah.
Like every moment of this record, even when they get melody, like there's a fluttering piano that appears in Velotis and Voitalu and again in Ikikarmi. I hope I'm saying these things right. I'm probably not. But anyway, even that like fluttering piano melody, like you think it's pretty and it is, but it's also accompanied by the darkest, most creepy, horrifying sounds, and the layers are just everywhere. They're coming at you from everywhere. And it makes everything, even though it's beautiful, quote unquote, just dark.
Yeah, there's a really interesting contrast here between like the rhythms themselves, which are again like kind of swingy, like they're like really solid grooves, and then the music itself, which is often like very sizzly and gritty. Like when it comes down to like what really drives the album outside of the drums, the bass on here, which is the most ungodly fuzzy sound. Like it is heavy and droning. When it comes in on that opening track, which I already said once, I'm good. It is the most gnarly, sizzly sound. It sounds like it's being played through like broken speakers. Like it completely blew out, but it kind of works with like the dense layering. And when the guitars come in, like it just kind of occupies like a little bit more of the high range, like not much more, because everything in here is very bassy. Like there's just so much low end on this album. And then you have the vocals on top, which, I mean, a lot of this album I feel like is like partially musical, like, you know, like definitely about like writing like an engaging song, but also about sound manipulation and distorting the atmosphere and making the listener feel very uncomfortable. And the vocals cement that because they are constantly distorted, they are screamed and bellowed, occasionally like a spoken word thing. The strange robotic vocal filter that is on the title track is particularly haunting. Like it feels like it's kind of phasing in and out. It's like HAL 9000 if it was just very open about the fact that it really didn't like people and would totally kill you in a heartbeat.
Or in my favorite track, Hatatuli, once again, the vocals are swirling. Like, and seriously, it's like being in a 3D theater. Like, they're just coming from every single angle, and you can hear them going around your head. And it's like, the whole time you're just like, what? It's creepy, but it's effective.
Yeah, a lot of this album, like, for me, like, you think about, like, tension and release. This doesn't, like, release tension. It keeps the tension on. It just sort of, like, you know, lets off a little bit. But it never at any point really feels, like, very comfortable. Like, again, the fluttering piano melodies occasionally kind of bring in a little bit of melody that isn't just hellishly dark. Voitalu, not really sure, didn't see an accent point. I probably saw a whole bunch of umlauts and didn't write them down. But that song, the haunting pianos that kind of come in like in the foreground, it kind of feels again like, I don't know, like a horror score, but like more like Hitchcock or something like that. And it adds just enough melody, and it's looped, so it kind of stays repeating in there, that it kind of keeps the song a little bit centered on not just the atmosphere. It becomes like a little bit more musical, because again, like the sound manipulation thing is a big thing on here. Like synths will pulsate, guitars will sound extra sizzly, and there's like definitely a lot of like weird effects on a lot of stuff in here. Even on the drums, occasionally they sound more natural. The opening track, they sound more like a drum machine. But in terms of like probably the most melodic track on here, or at least the one that I would say is like at least more centered on some melodies that repeat, is probably Ikikarmi. I don't know how to say it. I'm not even going to pretend I know how to say it. Opens up with the isolated piano, and honestly, like the melody kind of stays very prevalent on like top of the song. Like the background, the Like the low end is just pretty much the drum beat and this droning sort of hiss behind it. The vocals are more chanted on that one, at least at first, and it does build into some heavier parts. Again, very similar to Godflesh. You get swells of noise. There's like a maintained tension. It's, again, rhythmically hypnotic. To me, it kind of sounded like like a project between Neurosis and Skinny Puppy. Like, hey, let's write something that'll terrify normal people. A lot of this, again, kind of like locks on to like one particular mode and builds on it rather than doing a lot of transitions. There's not a tremendous amount of like big transitions where it completely like shifts the rhythm, goes into a breakdown or anything like that. Like it kind of stays locked into like a groove and then builds on it, and again does it in layers with loops.
But the cool thing is when they build on something, it's both in your face and subtle. Like in Ikikarmi, when that drum beat comes in, it's off time. It's like a polyrhythm that lays over top. And they'll take that groove and then layer synths on top of it, and that's how they build the sound. But as chaotic as it sounds, it's actually very put together. It's actually a super fun groove.
Yeah, even the vocals come in on a different meter, but eventually it all starts sort of like syncing up, and by then your eyes have rolled back into your head and you're chanting to yourself and furniture is floating in your room.
Well, and a lot of that is because I think the vocals, at least in the first half of that, are backwards.
Or in Finnish, which, I don't know. I feel like if you say these things wrong or out of order, you're going to summon some ancient Lovecraftian demon, and I'm pretty sure we already screwed up, sorry, planet Earth. The off-time rhythms are kind of like the thing that I really latched onto, like Volatus, whatever it is. The opening to that is like a long kind of fade in. You hear the drums very muffled behind it. And initially I thought it was like kind of a blast beat.
Yeah.
But as it comes in, as soon as like all of the fog, well, most of the fog lifts off of that moment, it's this weird like kind of like skittering drum pattern on the snare where it feels like it's almost kind of a blast, but there's an accent point where you can kind of hit a groove.
It feels like a D beat, but it feels like the D beat is accented on different beats. So instead of being like straightforward, it's like 1, 2, hitch, 3, hitch, 1, 2, it's something strange, and that kind of pattern helps play along with whoever is taking a belt sander to the keyboards.
Or guitars. Like, honestly, I think there are guitars in there, and sometimes it's really hard to distinguish what's making what noise. Like there's synths on here, there's acoustic guitars, like the opening track opens up with a pulsating like acoustic harmony that turns kind of into the rhythm.
It sounds like a video game.
Yeah, either that or someone like palm muted a mandolin or something like that. I don't really know, but at least on Volutus, I feel like there are guitars, but they're very scratchy sounding, like they're not necessarily like picking them, they're scratching the strings themselves. Yep. This is probably one of the few songs here where I genuinely got like a black metal vibe on it. There are what sounds like tremolos on it, but I'm not entirely sure it's like a tremolo in the traditional sense where you're actually playing the tremolo. I think it's a blend of noises meant to sound like a black metal tremolo, but not traditional is kind of the way on here, and it works. Like it kind of sounds like a flat out black metal riff for a moment. And then the song kind of like dips out into this kind of quiet calm. Like it's one of the more peaceful moments on here, I guess. And then the song completely loses its mind. It descends into a nightmarish hellscape towards the end. This is probably the most unhinged moment on this entire album, where I feel like it goes full bore avant-garde to the point where it's not even musical anymore. It is just everyone playing everything loudly and distorted at once. I think if they played this song live when this part comes on, kick on the strobes, throw a bunch of stink bombs at the audience, and then release like jars of locusts everywhere. That's the only way I think they could really capture just what they did there. Because, oh my God. And then it ends in tinnitus, which is an all too familiar sound to me. What?
And then you have the last track, which is at least drum free. There is still kind of some groove in it. Vierva Usva, I think. That, to me, is probably one of the darkest, blackest, most sinister soundscapes on this whole record, and that's saying quite a lot. It's droning. It's extremely hypnotic. There's like little echoing melodies in the distance and contrasting string rhythms, and it's just like this never-ending build. You spend this whole time like, yeah, here it comes, volume swell, and then it's over and you're like, what the fuck?
The booming bass synths at the beginning of that song remind me a lot of Cult of Luna's last album, especially the song Cold Burn. Like, it's just like the doom trumpets, and the whole song feels like a score, like a score to some like post-apocalyptic movie, like, you know, a slow panning shot of a desolate wasteland with mutants and cyborgs and bombed out buildings and very few humans, because we clearly fucked up somewhere along the way. But this whole album, though, despite it being very dark, atonal, and just creepier than hell, I found it very alluring. And a lot of it had to do with like the rhythms on here. The rhythms kind of lock you in. You kind of get in this almost meditative state because you're kind of banging your head along with this, or kind of grooving. I don't know. It's like kind of heavy, like in terms of like headbanging heavy, but it's not. Like a lot of the riffs are almost like just single chords, and they're just played on the most like ugly sounding guitars and basses ever. But you kind of stay just in the music, and generally like avant-garde music I find like very challenging because that's what it should be. But this one, it wasn't so complex that it actually turned me off, and it wasn't so atonal where it just came across as like, you know, dissonant soundscapes with like no substance. These songs actually really gel well, and they flow really well.
It's those drum loops. The drum loops are very simplistic, but they're huge, like fat beats. And that's, I think, what keeps you locked, or at least centered, because it is very trance-like. I listened to this record driving over here, and I don't know if that was my best move, because I made it 17 miles and kind of forgot how I got here. I think that's what keeps you locked, because the atmosphere and the layering of the synths and whatever the hell is happening in the background just keeps building and building, but that drum beat keeps you locked in. And I think that's what makes this listenable.
So overall, honestly, I'm going to give this 4 stars. Like, I was really impressed with this. You know, again, like rhythmically hypnotic, but musically, like, I don't know, there's something to it outside of just the noise and the hellish atmosphere in here. Like, there's something really engaging in terms of the construction. Like, this kind of has like those post-metal builds where you kind of start with one element and just keep building on it. There's a lot of stuff in here that reminded me of Godflesh, and I'm a big Godflesh fan, but also like bands like The Ruins of Beverast, God, even like early Pitch Shifter and stuff like that. Like the kind of like industrial grit on here mixed with like the just dark, sinister kind of like black metal fucking mood. It really works on here. Like, there's just something about this album that kind of just draws me in rather than puts me off. And sometimes this is the kind of stuff that I just can't get into. But oddly, yeah, like this was just kind of, I don't know, creepy and hypnotic. If you're a big fan of, Lurker of Chalice, I would say is kind of close. I have a couple of albums, and it is kind of comparable there. 1349's Revelations of the Black Flame, that's kind of close. It's more of an ambient album. I don't know. This is definitely cooler than that one. Maybe like a little bit of Cult of Luna. Again, Godflesh.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Godflesh, even like Throbbing Gristle. It's got a lot of elements of just like filthy industrial and power electronics, but also, again, like just dissonant, evil sounding black metal. I don't know. There's like some sludge in here too. I don't know. It's just a really creepy but really interesting listen. Check it out.
I actually agree with Nick. I'm going to give it 4 stars as well, and that's crazy because normally I don't get into industrial music. I have a really hard time connecting with industrial music, but this kind of just grabbed me in a different way, and I think it's because of how dark and kind of horrific it is in conjunction with not being so robotic or electronic that it doesn't sound real. Like those big fat drum loops are what got me. The couple of songs that I really like, the title track and then Hatatuli, it's that hypnosis type of trance that kept me engaged throughout most of this record. The never-ending layers on this are really entertaining, and in conjunction with the constant like whispered swirling vocals, it just creates this whole like dreamscape thing. And I wasn't really sure what I was listening to, and I was kind of creeped out, but at the same time I was also kind of magnetically drawn to it just because it was so entertaining. The heavy parts on this, again, are not your typical heavy parts. Like, I wouldn't call it riffy by any means, but it's those synth swells and how loud they get and just there's 75 things going on, and you can just feel the crushing weight. If you're a fan of Godflesh and Dr. Dre and Portishead and a little bit of like Portal atmosphere, I don't know what to compare it to. Probably more of what Nick said too, but even when I read psychedelic black metal, this is not what I thought I was getting into. I would definitely recommend giving it a listen.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you were new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We now have memberships. If you are interested in joining them, they are only 99 cents. There's a join button down below. We are currently offering a members-only live stream thing we're going to do probably sometime next month when the releases slow down, because there's a lot coming up.
Yeah.
We only have one emoji because I've been kind of just lazy with the emojis. I apologize, but it is a booger troll, so that's a thing. This is pretty much a new way to support the channel. That and, StreamYard is raising their prices, so this kind of helps us out with that. Anyway, if you are interested in joining, the button is down below, and we also still have thrallsmetal.com where we have our t-shirts and our hats. I believe the old t-shirts are still discounted, even though all the t-shirts are technically old at this point. And the hats are probably the same price as they were before, too. Anyway, if you're interested in any of that stuff, thrallsmetal.com link and the join button down below.
And as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, album reviews, discography rankings, never-ending segments, is it metal, is it not metal, states of metal, Nick's never-ending collection updates. All this stuff all the time from us, and we do it for you guys because we appreciate you. Thank you to all of our family, our friends, everybody that's a part of this channel. I can't believe we're almost at 20,000 subscribers. That's absolutely mind-blowing to me. I remember when we hit 100 subscribers, and I thought that was pretty damn cool, and now we're well beyond that, so thank you.
Yeah, it's totally proof that you guys have no taste, but we also appreciate that too. No, seriously, it means the world to us that this channel has blown up well beyond anything I ever expected. Yeah. And again, thank you guys so much for all of your support. So one more big thank you, because you guys have earned multiple thank yous because you've been so awesome.
Thank you.
And we will catch you later.